Okay, so we're here with Marlene Oliver of 680 News, and thank you very much.
You're
this
welcome.
is great. So, we'll just kick around some questions. So, in general, what are the biggest challenges of your jobs in terms of deadlines, workload? What are those challenges?
I'll explain to you that my day usually begins when I wake up in the morning. I am now doing afternoons, which means I'm at the radio station at 1 o'clock and we're on the air at 2:30. I am writing newscasts from 2:30 to 7:30. That's the afternoon shift. But I start first thing in the morning with monitoring what CBC is doing, what News Talk is doing, and of course what we're doing on 680. And also with breakfast television. I'll explain a little bit more about breakfast television in just a moment why we're doing that. So that way I have an idea of what the top stories are, who has different news items that they're dealing with, and who's on the same page. Then once I get to the station, when we have a full contingent in the fall, right now in the summertime we've got a few more on holidays, but when we have full reporters, we have 5 reporters that I assign in the field. There is also a business department, sports and entertainment department that we coordinate. So they all get assigned, and then I write and try to write as much copy as I possibly can. We generally aim for 12 to 16 stories per half hour. So it's tight writing, and we have different areas that we must cover. We have the stories of the day, kind of the stories that everybody is talking about, whether it happens to be weather, traffic, government issues, health can be. Yesterday we were, for instance, leading with West Nile virus as an example. Then you go into international stories. You can deal with disasters, tragedies from other parts of the world. There's also health stories. Now in the world that we live in, entertainment news is a big issue. Who is doing what with Michael Jackson's children, who is tweeting what Justin Bieber is doing. And of course we also cover sports stories as well. So you make a package every half hour, and then we get the thing rolling, and we're live from 2:30 till 7:30, and it can change quite a bit during the time that I'm on here.
So a very busy, lot of high intensity, I would think.
Yeah, it gets easier the longer you do it, because you must begin with an accumulated knowledge. We don't have time to look things up. You have to know cabinet ministers, you have to know the history of events. You can't, we're talking for instance of shootings, victims, police chief, the homicide squad detectives. You have to have kind of that accumulated knowledge. As far as information that comes in from the outside, if I can just touch on that for a second, talking about information I get from hospitals, from pharmaceutical companies. I'm also the health reporter for the station. From public relations firms. I'll take a look at it. First of all, it all comes by email. Nothing comes by snail mail anymore. So everything comes to me by email. I will take a look at those emails, and I would say probably less than a minute have made a decision as to whether or not the story is appropriate for 680 or not, whether it's possible for me to do it on that day or not. It may be a story that can stand up. It doesn't have to run. It doesn't have a time frame attached to it. And in a lot of cases, I will have taken the story, gone through as much as I'm going to go through it, and written it up with less than 3 minutes. For us, 2 minutes is an exceedingly long period of time.
Yeah, and that's something. So what are the biggest day-to-day challenges of working with public relations or media relations practitioners?
The biggest, they can make my day great. They can make it very easy, or they can make it difficult. And to be honest with you, I don't have time for difficult, so unfortunately I have to just put whatever it is that they're talking about aside. In other words, it doesn't either run that day, or it may not run for a while. Again, because I do health, quite often I can put a story aside and say, you know, you're talking about, might be an example, talking about allergies, but it may be a cool April and we haven't had plants grow yet, so they may be a little early for doing allergies. Maybe talking about sunscreen, but it's been a cloudy May, so we're not there yet, so I can hold stories for a little bit. So there's a couple of things. A, is it relevant for our audience? And that means you have to do your homework. In other words, our audience, 680 News, are 25 to 54-year-old adults, professionals, married, generally speaking. Family issues are a big deal on our station, and they also generally commute about 45 minutes. There are other radio stations that will be dealing with an audience that's under 25 years of age, and there are other radio stations that deal with an audience that's over 54 years of age. So first and foremost, I have to feel as if it fits that 25, 54-year-old demographic. We skew men. We have more, about 60% male listeners as opposed to 40% female listeners. Therefore, if it's a men's issue, that bumps up in priority for me, which means automotive, finance, sports, men's health, those types of issues. It also has to be, because as I was mentioning before, we do approximately 16 stories a half hour. When you subtract commercials and traffic and weather together, you can understand there actually isn't a lot of time for news. And you'll get a good sense of this as well if you watch the evening TV newscast. They're very good at it. They will cover quite a few news stories, but they're short. And it wouldn't be a bad idea with a stopwatch to find out how short. For us, 40 seconds is a long time for us to be talking for 40 seconds. So whatever information I get from a public relations company, I've got to be able to tell the complete story, probably closer to 30 seconds. So when I get information that may be great, maybe terrifically informative, but it's 3 pages long, that's impossible. I want to be able to get the whole story within the first, ideally, 2 paragraphs. And the other part to that is how well is it written. I want to, in a lot of cases now, simply go from email to what we have as a Burley news system, block copy in, clean it up, and go. So I need stuff that is relevant. I need stuff that's well written. If it's a pharmaceutical, I don't need a name that's 16 syllables. I need whatever the brand name is of it. And I need to have it, I guess, in a way that is kind of user-friendly for me.
Mm-hmm. So it's good for practitioners to build up contact with you through, taking that kind of an approach, getting things that are well written to you, very clear, understanding the demographic that you're reaching.
That's right.
And are there some approaches that you like or don't like with corporate communications practitioners?
The people who send me information that I don't use, and generally speaking, people are pretty good about it. So first of all, anybody who calls me on the phone, I don't want to have a chat with you. You're probably a very nice person. And believe it or not, years ago, I used to go out for lunches with people, and we would have events that we don't do any of that stuff anymore. There isn't time. Our days have all gotten longer than they used to be. The shifts are longer. When I was doing public affairs before, I used to be responsible for 1 hour. Now I'm responsible for 5 hours. So you can imagine the prep time and everything is everything's gotten a lot longer and takes up more of the day than it used to. So we don't have time for the other kind of nice human parts of work. The stories that I don't use, the ones that I don't use outright are to do with something that has nothing to do with me or my audience. For instance, if I get a news release that talks about a gum promotion at Young Dundas Square. Now, I do radio. Probably the gum promotion would make a great picture, but you got to keep in mind, I do radio. I don't need things with photo ops. That doesn't appeal to me at all, and I don't need kind of what's the right, kind of a nice way of putting it, the kind of the kitschy, gee whiz, we'll have a celebrity come down, and wouldn't that be fun to have a picture of? I don't need a picture. So that stuff for me is a complete waste of time. That's just, you're not helping yourself there at all. And the only other one is sometimes, again, because of the health stuff I do, there can be scientific developments that are released from St. Michael's Hospital, McMaster, Sick Children's Hospital, and they're kind of minute advances in science. They may be something to do with brain cancer, something to do with a longer life expectation for someone with lung cancer, and they're wonderful and they're important things, but you've got to keep in mind I'm broadcasting to over 1 million people, so the percentage of those people who might be affected by that story is slim. So I do need kind of broad appeal stories. Now, just while we're talking about this, in this modern world that we live in, and because we're talking about Toronto, 2 important things, if I can just deviate here for a second. Corporate convergence is huge. There are now coming into Toronto basically 2 broadcasters, Bell and Rogers. So Bell owns CTV, which owns Chum, which owns soon Astral Radio. So I'm not going to run through all of that, but you should do your homework and find out who all of them are. On the Rogers side, Rogers owns 680 plus CHFI, Fan 590, and KISS. But we also own the Blue Jays, we own Chatelaine, we own Maclean's, we have 53 magazines, we own the Maple Leafs. So, back to what I was talking about the silly thing with the celebrity and the signing, if it's a Blue Jay, we're there. We have no choice about it. If it is something to do with the Maple Leafs, we will cover it. If it is something that is in Maclean's magazine that week, we will bump out other stories to make sure it's there. The similar situation has happened in the United States with Turner Broadcasting, with General Electric now owning the big networks down there. It makes your job as a public relations professional either a little bit more difficult if you're not part of the corporate group, or on the flip side, it can make it infinitely easier. If I get a phone call from someone from Chatelaine or Today's Parent, Profit Magazine, Canadian Business, and says that they have a story idea, there is no ifs, ands, or buts, it's running. If there's anything to do with the Blue Jays, the Blue Jays Wives, the Blue Jays charity, we run it. So be aware of that. Sometimes I'm not turning something down that you are talking about because it's a bad idea. It may be because of corporate convergence, which is a reality that I live in, and a lot of broadcasters do in Toronto nowadays. We only have so many minutes per half hour, and we must now, corporately designated, be promoting things from inside. You'll notice it, or may have noticed it significantly during the time of the Olympics with CTV. There could have been a raging house on fire in downtown Toronto, but CTV's lead story at 6 o'clock was going to be the Olympics. There's no way then. There's no question about that. So that's something just be aware of. The best side of it is, as I say, if you're part of the corporate structure, great. You just pick up the phone and everybody who's in it all the way through, reluctantly or otherwise, will run that story. If you're not, it makes your job a bit more of a challenge.
Okay. That's great. And have you ever run into any problem PR folks and that you've had to deal with, and how do you manage people like that?
I hate to say, life is easier these days. I don't pick up the phone. I haven't checked my voicemail at work probably in well over a year. I don't pick up the phone ever, and email's pretty easy to hit delete. So I can't say that I have anyone who is a problem. I have some people who are more enthusiastic about their